Eric Greitens. This is the show that respects your intelligence, and we work every day to bring you the perspectives and the insights that sometimes big tech seeks to silence. Well, we're joined now by Josh Hammer. He's the Newsweek opinion editor. He is a syndicated columnist. He is a research fellow with the Edmund Burke Foundation, and he has a powerful op-ed just out. It says, American elites are seeking to rig the game. Josh, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Governor. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Josh, one of the things that you say in the op-ed, you start right off, you say that the American ruling class has flexed its muscles like never before. Let's talk a little bit about that. From your perspective, who are the American ruling class and how are they flexing their muscles?
So, the term ruling class is something I borrowed from Angelo Codavia, actually, he was born in Italy. He was a longtime professor at Boston University, affiliated with the Claremont Institute. Angelo has written for years, possibly decades, about how America has become increasingly divided, not necessarily even between left and right, not necessarily between, geography even. In fact, actually, Michael Lind, the prolific essayist, had a great recent essay at Tablet talking about how this ruling class that we speak of is actually not geographically confined. It's not necessarily just a here or there kind of thing. It's a national ruling class. So when folks like Angelo, Michael Lind, and myself talk about it, what we're really referring to is kind of this nationwide elite social club, basically, whose membership is carefully circumscribed by whom you vote for, what educational degrees you have, if you have the requisite Ivy League credentials, if you went to a top tier elite state school. But most importantly, Governor, you have to have the correct beliefs. That is the most important thing to be part of the ruling class. No one who has wrong think beliefs, who has any kind of beliefs that are contrary to the woke, to the lowercase o orthodoxy that this nation has increasingly come to believe in, that makes you outside the ruling class. And that is kind of the divide that we're going to see over the next 4 years, is whether you are a loyalist of the regime and of the ruling class, or whether you are an enemy of the ruling class.
Yeah, and Josh, one of the things that you mentioned that a lot of our viewers comment on so often is that when they look at politics, they often don't see it any longer even as a conflict between Democrats and Republicans, so much as they often feel like it is a conflict between the establishment, the swamp, some will say, between elites and the American people. In the op-ed, one of the things that you talk about is how big tech has kind of moved in, and you talked about how they came in to kneecap Parler. Break that down for our viewers, if you would.
So, it's funny. I mean, look, I believe in capitalism, okay? I believe in the free market system. I always have. I'm sure your listeners do as well. The problem is that what we have in America in the year 2021 is not kind of an idealistic laissez-faire capitalist system like you read in an economics textbook. The system increasingly actually is very similar to what Deng Xiaoping, who replaced Mao Zedong as kind of the de facto head of the Chinese Communist Party in the 1980s, what he kind of referred to as capitalism with Chinese characteristics. And what I mean by that is that you have this huge, bulky, massive, ideologically monolithic regime that takes these quote-unquote private sector companies and effectively uses them as pawns. It uses them as appendages to accomplish what the actual government is not able to accomplish. Now, every country is a little different, but in America, what that usually means is that the government cannot accomplish it because we have this thing called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So here, what big tech is, okay, and big tech is increasingly a one-party industry. It is a Democratic Party donating industry. Back in the 90s when tech was first starting, they had some more Republican donors. Now that is no longer the case. Zuckerberg, Dorsey, all these people are all Democratic Party shills. And what you have is the government effectively sicking big tech onto the citizenry to accomplish what it cannot do directly. Because the government, because of the First Amendment, cannot directly censor you. But at least big tech thinks that because of Section 230, which of course has been in the news so much over the past couple of years, it thinks that it can kind of take these quote-unquote private companies to accomplish quote-unquote privately what it cannot do directly. So that's really what we're seeing here is the ruling class, inside and outside the government, they are acting in unison as one gigantic blob, if you will. And the target, of course, are folks like me and you, Governor, folks like us who just want to live our normal lives. You know, we want to go to church, synagogue. We want to just live our normal lives without being forced to bow at the altar of wokeness.
Right. And Josh, you also talk in the op-ed, I think very powerfully, about the election and how people's contentions about the election, whether there was fraud, how the election was conducted, and you talk about the difference between the way that claims made by the Democrats in 2016 were treated compared to claims that were made by conservatives in 2020. If you would break that down as well.
Sure. So, the double standard here is just off the charts. And it's kind of this double standard that we increasingly see in basically every facet of life that kind of got me to write this op-ed in the first place. But as far as election results in particular are concerned, every single time a Republican has won the White House since the year 2000, and what that, meaning George W. Bush in 2000, 2004, and of course Donald Trump in 2016, all three of those times, some motley crew of Democratic congressmen and senators rose to the floor to object to at least a portion of the results. Barbara Boxer, the former senator from California, famously did this in 2004 with respect to George W. Bush winning Ohio, which was the decisive state that year. And, back at that time, those objections were all kind of shot down, but no one really thought twice about it. They thought they were just kind of exercising what is clearly a tool afforded to them under our Constitution. Of course, when Republicans do it in an election unlike any other, where mail-in balloting has proliferated, where it's the highest turnout ever, where all these states are changing their election law midstream. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is engaging in transparently lawless behavior, and the U.S. Supreme Court is willfully turning a blind eye to it. Amidst all of this once-a-lifetime nonsense, some Republicans have, the gall to go up and raise similar concerns that their Democratic predecessors have, and now they're insurrectionists, seditionists, they're enemies of the regime. They should be expelled, punished. This is banana republic stuff, Governor. I mean, this is just increasingly clear that our side just does not play by the same rules. We are held to a totally different standard in every phase of life.
Yeah, and I think, a number of our viewers have pointed out that, and you make mention of the Russia collusion hoax in your op-ed, which went on for years and months after the election. You actually had Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi saying that the 2016 election was hijacked months afterwards, and all based on what we now know to be a completely false narrative regarding that Russia collusion hoax. Let's turn for a minute, Josh, and talk about one of the things we've been talking about with our viewers a lot is also what's been happening in the stock market. Break down your analysis of what's been happening with the folks who are on Reddit, with GameStop, with silver, etc.
So it seems like yet another manifestation of this same phenomenon that we were just discussing, right? Where, half of society plays by one set of rules, the other half plays by an entirely different set of rules. And, look, I'm not an investor by background, but I follow the markets. I have a personal account that I trade in every so often. I was an economics major way back in the day at our mutual alma mater, Duke. And, I generally consider myself somewhat financial literate. So I know that short selling is not necessarily the bane of all evil. I mean, it's not the end of the world for hedge funds to do what the name of their entire industry implies, hedge their bets. Mm-hmm. The problem is that when the brokerages come in, when Robinhood comes in the following day after this tremendous GameStop spike, and if you read the reports carefully, and I was following on Twitter very carefully that day, there are blue check financial industry reporters who are reporting that Robinhood clients actually had their GameStop shares forcibly sold. They did not execute those sell trades. They were forcibly sold in some incredibly paternalistic attempt, apparently, to manipulate markets. And, look, the more cynical among us might say, what's actually going on here? Janet Yellen, the new Treasury Secretary back during the Trump administration, if I'm not mistaken, she was collecting multi-$100,000 speaking fees for Citadel, which is a massive investment fund closely tied to Robinhood, what they did as a brokerage. Senator Hawley from your state, Missouri, had a wonderful piece at First Things Magazine yesterday, basically just saying that the system loses its integrity. Rightly or wrongly, the participants in it don't feel like they are given a shot. And we're talking about the financial system, the integrity of the financial system, which is something that obviously has taken a beating as far as reputation in the past with the 2008 bailouts and all of that. It's just so increasingly clear, I think, to many Americans that these sets of rules in every facet of life, whether it's whether it's church, whether it's synagogue, whether it's the stock market, whether it's university, whether it's anything, we just are held to an entirely different set of rules. And it's really sad to see the stock market go down this road like so many other institutions have already gone.
Yeah, Josh, we only have about 50 seconds left, but I want you quickly just to put on your historical hat. One of the things I enjoy about your columns is that they are always, chock full of real details, historically informed. You just were mentioning, Deng Xiaoping, 1979, what he wanted to do in China. When we look back at American history, we have had moments like this before. You think of the Cross of Gold speech in 1896, Teddy Roosevelt becoming president, in 1901, that what was happening then was you had a big movement, a populist movement in both parties. From your standpoint, again, just 30 seconds or so, where are we at now in American history? Are we seeing a similar movement?
I think we are. I mean, we are in the midst, I think, of what seems to me, and like many others that I speak with on a daily basis, it seems to me like we really are currently in the throes of a once-a-lifetime political realignment. I think the Democrats will only increasingly become the party of the elite, the credentialed, the PhDs, the suburban elites, and the Republicans are going to have to realize that their voters are working class. Now, there's going to be a chasm between the donor class and the working class.
Yes, who are going to come together. Well, folks, again, that is Josh Hammer. Check out his columns online. He's a syndicated columnist as well as a research fellow with the Edmund Burke Foundation. Stay right with us. We're going to be back with Amanda Head.